Hello, everyone. Welcome to the most engaging podcast you've ever listened to. My name is Mecca, and Fire Emblem Engage has been out for about a week now. And I thought it would be fun to have a more podcasty video about Engage. And so I'm inviting guests on to come in here and talk. And today I have Pavise on to talk to you about Fire Emblem Engage. Pavise, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. I've really been enjoying Engage, and I'm glad to be back in the Mechaverse. I don't think anyone caught on to that, but I'm still going to call you guys the Mechaverse.
If you haven't seen it, I went onto Pavis's channel a while ago to talk about Engage before it released, and I thought this would be a fun way to follow it up. So thank you for joining me, Pavis. We're going to talk about Engage in some detail. We're going to be careful with spoilers. Pavis, I think you said you were done up till chapter 13, right? Roughly speaking.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm about to enter chapter 10 as we're recording this. So we're not going to talk about anything that happens after chapter 9. And if we're going to get into, like, say, the chapter 6 plus-ish territory, we're going to be giving ample warning. So you can skip ahead if you're not that far in yet. I think most people who bought the game at this point are further ahead, but I just want to be careful because it's only a week from release. And some people might not even have bought the game yet. So we're just going to talk about our first impressions for this first week of playing Fire Emblem Engage. Pavis, just in general, how are you enjoying Fire Emblem Engage?
I'm really enjoying it. This is probably the most fun I've had playing Fire Emblem, probably since I started playing the series with Awakening. Because I started with Awakening, and as a first game for me, Awakening, I had a blast with that game. In retrospect, going back and playing it after other games, maybe not so much, but I haven't had such a positive experience with the series on a gameplay level than I have had with Engage over the past week. It's been an absolute blast playing this game, and I've had a lot of fun with it. So my gut impressions or my gut reaction is just really, really positive, especially the gameplay. I've had so much fun messing around with all the tools they give you. And one of my main concerns was, they wouldn't be able to challenge you. They wouldn't be able to, because you had so much power, they wouldn't be able to present a challenge, but it's been the exact opposite. I think because they've given you so many interesting tools, they've really also experimented with some of the map design and the way they lay things out to really give a decent challenge as well. So not only are their tools fun to use, it's fun to use them creatively to try to solve the challenges that they put in front of you. And for reference, I'm playing on hard. I know some people are playing on maddening, and they have even wilder experiences with the difficulty than I do. But I've been really satisfied playing the game so far, at least on a gameplay perspective. We can maybe talk about the story a little bit later, but I'd say gameplay-wise, top marks for me, at least out the gate.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I remember we talked about this pretty elaborately. Like you said, we were kind of worried that the game just couldn't handle this kind of power, and it kind of blew me away at how well it did, especially in the early game. The map is just ready for what they give you, which is such a rarity to see in Fire Emblem nowadays. That doesn't mean that the game won't be broken to pieces at some point, but at the very least, it has a very good first impression in that regard, because this is the way people have been talking about this game all over the places I've been. Like, people are comparing this game to, like, Conquest, which has always been the height for Fire Emblem gameplay, according to people who've played every game. I'm super impressed by it. It's like they give you the ability to warp across the map for like a billion tiles and then attack something right away, and it's balanced somehow. I find that super intriguing and amazing. And I don't know how they did it, because I thought they lost that ability a while ago, but apparently they found it back. I guess they had enough time to work on it. Do you have any like memorable moments from like the early game? They were like, wow, that's neat. How did that work out so well?
Not from the early game, but this is a general example. Later in the game, without giving away any details about the context, but this is at the point where I had a couple emblem rings that I was using, and I was in a situation where I was like, "There's no way I get out of this. There's no way." Like, I'd kind of got myself into a real difficult situation, but I still had my engages left, and the way it felt to just combine these engage abilities and use them in tactical ways was just so satisfying. Or an impossible situation, a situation that in any other Fire Emblem game I would be totally doomed. But because they gave me these awesome like engage abilities and tools, I think this isn't getting too deep into the game. I think I had the Sigurd ring and I had the Celica ring, and I think I used override to go through like 4 enemies, and
Yeah.
then I used Celica echo ability to take out what was left of 2 of them, and then a character had a personal skill that let them survive with 1 HP, and I play it off of that where I'm like, okay, they're gonna target that unit, but it'll be fun because it'll have 1 HP. Like all of these abilities and personal skills and just the setup of the map led to this really awesome just gameplay moment where things just came together perfectly. And I haven't had a moment in Fire Emblem where I just felt that satisfied and had so much fun in like a situation like that. Usually Fire Emblem, when you're trying to dig yourself out of a hole, it's always like, oh, I've just got to find some way to just survive the turn by playing defensive, and then maybe I have a chance to live, or I have to do something kind of, I don't know, something not fun to live the turn. And in this case, to live, I had to use all the mechanics, and it was super fun to use them and feel proactive using them too.
Mm-hmm. Oh, we should definitely talk about the rewind and the time crystal. I forgot to put that in the notes, but it's probably something that there's a couple things we should probably say about that because I had some new insights into it. But still, though, I want to get into a quick moment that I had early game that I think a lot of people share as well. There's a chapter where you're fighting, and this is chapter 2, by the way, so it's or like chapter 1. It's very early.
I know what you're about to say.
Yeah, so you have Lumera, right? And you defeat her the first time, and she's like, "Oh, let's make it a little tougher on you." And so she syncs with Sigurd as the enemy, and then Sigurd has the Rider's Bane, and so he can just roast your horses. And your Jagan guy, your Vander, he takes like 30 damage from that. It's like 3/4 of his HP. And Lumera has like, I think at base she already has like 9 move or something, and Sigurd adds another 5 onto it when she engages. And I think she caught almost everyone else off guard by using Rider's Bane. Now, by coincidence, I had put Fram, I think her name is, next to Vander and used Chain Guard, just, because of what might happen. And she just immediately ran up to him and like Rider's Baned him for 0. I was like, calculated.
I was not so lucky. My vendor died a horrible death.
Oh no!
In that situation, they got hit by Lumera, and then an archer picked off the final HP to take him out. It was a jump scare to be sure.
Does he come back, or did he just have to restart?
He comes back. At that point, you don't have the time crystal. He just says like, "Oh, I've got to retreat," and because it's a mock battle, I think the story's set up, so they're not so mean to take him away completely. But,
okay, good.
But yeah, I have another moment to follow that up with when I did get later into the game. This is I think chapter 4, and you just have the Celica Warp Ragnarok. The first chapter you get it.
Yes.
I got way over ambitious with Warp Ragnarok, and I actually got Saline killed before I got the time crystal. I got her killed on turn 1. I get the time crystal, and then I'm like, oh, I can just rewind to the beginning.
Nope.
And then no, the time crystal starts the moment you get it in terms of its tracking.
Yeah,
so I
didn't press
had
record
to
yet.
Reset. Yeah, I had to reset the chapter the old-fashioned way to get Celica and Saline back. So that was also a funny moment because like these abilities, they are powerful, but also you can still. A lot of them change where you are or your orientation. And you can still put yourself in a shitty position using Override or Warp Ragnarok. And I found that out the hard way. I'm like, oh, maybe I can't overextend with these as much as I thought I could. And the game definitely hit me hard for thinking or trying to get away with some shenanigans.
Yeah, I found that early game Warp Ragnarok is very scary to use because you're probably going to put it on Saline and she's going to die if you put her too far in, and no one else can really keep up with that besides whoever's holding Sigurd, right? So it's just super hard to get into battle and then get out safely if you want to. I usually use Warp Ragnarok to bail out other people that are in trouble, or to get someone out of trouble themselves, or I put it on someone that is actually durable and enjoy like a 7 damage Ragnarok on an enemy Pegasus Knights just to get him in there. There's so much room for creativity. It's great. Should we talk about the time crystal for a bit? Because I didn't put this in my notes,
Sure.
but there's a couple things that I want to say about it. It's been in 3 games now, I want to say. Echoes 3 Houses in this game in different name variation, but they all do the same. You just rewind time to before you made a mistake, basically. And we talked about this in your video, I think, pretty elaborately, I think, where we talked about the consequences of putting the terminal in your game as a Fire Emblem developer. It felt like Three Houses was just doing it to milk. They were just putting like ambush reinforcements in your game to milk the Divine Pulse uses from you, and that felt kind of cheap. But I feel like in this game it doesn't bother me at all, even though it gives you 10 uses, which sounds like way too much. But the new thought I've had on this is that it's kind of difficult to foresee what your actions are going to do without just trying it out. That I really don't mind the option to wind it back. The maps aren't that long anyway, so you're usually, at least not until that point. Like that goes for almost everything I'm saying, by the way, is I've only played up until chapter 9, and so I know the maps are going to change a whole lot in a lot of different ways. And so this might not be true for the rest of the game, but at least from my experience so far, that goes for everything I'm saying, it just feels like you're trying to look for a set of moves that can work, and if the RNG allows it a little bit, then you're fine and you can move on. And I think that is not what Fire Emblem has always been about, but for this game, for this experience, it works for me. You find a set of moves, and maybe with a little bit of luck, you pull through. That's fine. You don't need to rig. You don't need to do anything weird with the time crystal. It's just, okay, if I do this, this happens, that's a mistake. Let me rewind back and find a set of moves that is more likely to work, and you just keep doing that until you win. And I think that's a fine gameplay loop. It kind of erases permadeath in a way, but it's still fun in a different way for me. That's the conclusion I've come to with Time Crystal. Is that the same for you then?
Yeah, I'd agree. It's a new style of play where I find that when I'm messing around and experimenting, knowing I have the time crystal as a backup option, if things don't necessarily go my way, means that I can just go crazy with the tools I'm given to try wild and unique stuff. And it kind of just takes off that limiter.
Yeah.
And, that may not be what classic Fire Emblem is about, but I think it does lead, like you're saying, to a fun gameplay loop of experimentation, of each turn trying to figure out how you can, just get to the next turn in a good position. And if you have to use maybe a few rewinds to get to that point, it's still enjoyable to do so, and it's still fun. It's a different flavor, it's a different style, but I think it works great with this game, especially with all the tools they give you. You don't have to feel kind of scared to go wild with them or use them as you see fit, and really get creative because you do have that backup option. Now, do I still wish there was maybe a game mode where you could turn it off? Yeah. But I think in the meantime, I think not using it if you do want that style of play is still a valid option. I think they have a built-in restart chapter button now in the menu.
I saw that. That's great.
So if you just want to still play that style or get that flavor, you can still manually impose it. I wish there was a way for it to be, built into the game, but I think for now that's passable. And I think the new gameplay style with all these new tools they give you and rewinding time to kind of, if things don't go right, to find another creative solution. I agree. I still, at least to its own unique and fun style, I don't think I felt the same way like that in Three Houses at all. I think specifically with the tools they give you in this game, combined with how they design the maps in this game, it leads to that experience being a lot more positive with the rewind feature.
Yeah, for sure. I have two follow-up thoughts that I want to run by you real quick. One of them is, would you find it interesting if they gave you a mode of some sorts where it's turned off? I guess you already said that, because I'm reminded of Three Houses, where if you beat Maddening, but you only did it on New Game, not New Game Plus, you got a special title screen, which was like, it was a stupid reward. It was like, people call it the golden shower, right? Because it was so ugly. But, it told you like, hey, we know you want to beat this game with New Game. You can beat Maddening with New Game or New Game Plus. And New Game Plus is clearly the better quality of life option. It's so much easier. But they said, hey, if you want to challenge yourself, we see you and we will reward you. It's a stupid reward, but it's there. And I think it would be interesting if Fire Emblem games offered some kind of silly reward like that, like a ranking page or a medal or an achievement or something silly like that for beating the game without using the rewind feature at all. I think that would be really interesting if the game, of course, if the game design supports it, which I'm not sure about for Engage, but something like that I think would be neat. That would be my only concern with Divine Pulse.
I think, this game does have a achievements board. So I think maybe there could have been a way to work it in, but I think some kind of acknowledgement. That's another way, instead of putting in a mode, of just acknowledging, to maybe give an incentive to people to do that. But it feels like going forward, I don't know if they will do that. It really does feel like the rewind features are now embedded into
Yeah.
the series going forward. I don't see them going away, and I don't know if they're going to revisit or incentivize playing in like the old style. I think
Hmm.
they're going to probably leave that in players' hands to self-impose. That's just my prediction. They could prove me wrong,
Hmm.
but I like you're saying, I would like a mode where it could just be turned off, or like you're saying, some kind of acknowledgement for not using it. Because I do still think that classic Fire Emblem experience of every turn matters. If like, you make a mistake, it has permanent consequences. That is still a fun experience unto itself. Not to take away from the fun that is the game at base with all these engage abilities and rewinds. Different experiences, but both fun in their own ways and for different people.
Yeah, for sure. I was reminded when you talked about the different experimentation and knowing you have that way of going back at least to fix that if it turns out to be a mistake. It reminds me of when I was playing Tearing Saga. I think I've asked you before. Did you play that? Like Tearing Saga?
No, I've not played Tearing Saga. No.
Okay, well, you don't need to know anything to understand this. Don't worry. Basically, that game has a lot of wacky stuff. That's all you need to know. It has weird weapons that do weird things, skills, everything you could possibly think of that's been weird in Fire Emblem. Tearing Saga has something kind of like it.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole fun of having those things is being able to experiment with it. But if you know as the player that the consequence of trying something out and failing is having to replay a whole chapter, especially in a slow game like Tearing Saga where everything takes forever, that feels really bad. So you're not really incentivized to go out of your way and experiment and engage with the turn wheel does the opposite, like you said. But Tearing Saga has one thing that's really cool, and that's the save staff, where you have a limited use staves that saves your game in the middle of a battle. So it's kind of like the DS save points, but except it's on an actual staff. And I noticed I was hoarding that thing because I didn't really need it, and I was just playing it safely. And there was one chapter where it was so difficult I was using that staff like 3 times. And every time after I use it, I was like, oh, well, it's time to try out some funny things because I might as well. Because if I die, I can just go
Yeah.
back. And it
If
increased
I
the fun
die, I
of playing
die.
so much. It was so great. And that I was just reminded of that when you talked about Engage, allowing me to just experiment. It's absolutely great. Why don't we talk for a moment about the hub world, Somniel? Because
Mhm.
I don't know about you, but I'm pleasantly surprised with how much I like being in Somniel. I don't like every single thing in it, but the general vibe, I like it, and most of all, I think the size is like perfect for a hub world. What do you think?
I agree. I think the size is just right. I've seen a few people with thoughts or with opinions that they still want to return to the My Castle size where everything is pretty much instantly accessible because of that size of that area. But I think the Somniel as a place is much more fully realized than it like My Castle was. And I think the quality of life of the experience is much higher than the monastery was. Monastery was an absolute pain to get around. Even the navigating the mini map to fast navigate places was an absolute pain because having to hit the joystick in the correct like angle to get to the room you wanted to teleport to is
Oh
really
yeah,
annoying. In this game, they just give you a list, which thank God you just could just go from the list, you teleport to the room you want to go to, easy. And even then, running across the Somniel doesn't take long at all. You can
no,
get from one side to the other or top to bottom really fast, especially if you're running. So I think the size and the amount of time I'm spending in Somniel is much more manageable and much more pleasant than previous iterations, of this feature.
yeah, definitely agree with on outcomes there. I was going to complain about how to fast travel around because I was a little annoyed that the map you see is different from the map where you fast travel menu. Like it kind of has a different
Uh,
map on it. It's kind of tilted. It's like a
it's like
3D
a
almost
3D model
image.
thing, right? Yeah.
It's a little different. But now that you remind me of what it was to go around the monastery that way, I was like, you know what? This actually made a whole lot of sense. Maybe this is actually the better solution. I think there could have been an in between that's like slightly better, but I'm not going to
Uh-huh.
nitpick it too much. Generally speaking, I'm fine with fast traveling. And like you said, if the fast travel annoys you a little bit, chances are that walking there is almost as fast, if not just as fast. And since you, after every chapter, you're probably going around most of the thing anyway to pick up all the loots and, talk to all your dogs or whatever you want to do. And so you're probably going to be almost everywhere anyway. So the fast travel isn't that necessary to do everything. There are some nitpicks I do have about Somniel though, and This is just nitpicks because these are things I'm gonna run into constantly between chapters. Overall, though, I will say like Somniel is just pleasant to be in. It's just a very chill place. I find it much more relaxing than the monastery. It's like a little vacation from the chapter. I just like unwinding there for a little bit, which is a feeling I don't really have with the hub worlds all that much so far. It's just so relaxing.
Oh yeah,
You
it's
agree?
definitely relaxing. I don't know if
Like
you.
it's same.
I'm curious about this. Maybe before
Mhm.
you get into your nitpicks, how long on average do you find yourself spending in Somniel? For me, because I've been streaming, it's been a little easier for me to keep track of the time because I can just look through the VOD and see like, oh, how long I've been spending in Somniel. Mine usually ends up between 40 minutes to an hour each time between, but that's because I'm doing most of the stuff that I'm able to between each chapter, and like I'm really taking my time with it to go with it. But I'm interested to hear if you had a similar time frame that you're spending in there, longer or shorter.
It might be similar. When I was still going through tutorials, reading everything, talking about everything, it might have been longer on average. But then again, early on, there's not much unlocked. Maybe right now it's
No.
still longer. Right now, the main time-consuming thing is going back and forth between the Somniel, where I get my things, and the chapter preparations, where I do my things. And then I realize, oh, I need one more thing. I have to go all the way back. And I'd have to like make a shopping list for myself on what to do exactly. That is a little time consuming. I know today I spent an embarrassingly long time going back and forth, but that was mostly because I was trying to reset for a good bond ring, so it doesn't really count. That's like several hours in there. Give me my S rank gold one, please. Thank you. Yeah. Anyway, nitpicks, because I think my time is probably similar to yours, I think.
Mhm.
Nitpicky things. I think during your podcast, your video, I talked about something that ended up being very specifically true, and it annoys me. Push-ups. I don't like doing
Oh
push-ups
yeah.
to get +2 strength on Lear. Just give my Lear 2 more strength and make the minigame optional, and it's better for literally everyone out there. I don't want to do push-ups every time. And my Lear was at base strength for the first 7 chapters or so I really needed those push-ups. I never want to do them again, but I'm going to do them every time because I don't want to miss out on 2 strength. It's that FOMO is keeping me in. I don't want to do push-ups. And also the other options for exercise are, from what I can tell, completely pointless. Like, why are they there? To break my Switch controller? Like, what? Why? Right? Like, why would you play the other 2 minigames?
Yeah,
Is there a reason for them?
the other two mini games, I'm first of all, I'm terrible at those types of games. I'm terrible at mashing and I'm terrible at rhythm games. So those two games are tailor made to just me be terrible at. So I find myself also I do push-ups every time because it's the only game I can actually do properly because I'm just so terrible at the others.
But you do the push-ups every time though, right? Just to get the strength, the 2 strength.
Yeah, I do them every time.
Well,
Yeah.
got to keep up your push-ups. Now, if this game had like a Wii
Yeah.
like integration where you would do push-ups in real life to get the +2 strength, I can get behind that because that way we'd all get some exercise in. But unfortunately, that is not reality. The other nitpick I have about the Somniel is, of course, the fact that there's 2 rooms that you want to go between a lot. It's called the ring chamber
I know.
and the
Let me
arena.
guess. Yeah, let me guess.
They should be one
Yeah,
room.
Rick Shaver. Yeah,
There should be one room.
I agree. Oh my god, it is so annoying where I'm going switching between those two rooms. You've got a whole loading screen between them, and oh my god, it is very annoying. I agree.
Hmm. And that is once you realize you can fast travel between them to save some time, because I imagine some people are going out of the room to walk to the other place to get 2 loading screens for the price of 1. That's even worse.
Yeah, I made that mistake a few times where I was like, oh, I gotta go back to the ring chamber now, and then I just leave and then get hit with 2 loading screens. I realize now, okay, I could just
Hmm.
fast travel there, but yeah, I have no clue why those are 2 separate areas.
Hmm.
It's a pain. Yeah, it's a pain.
Especially because they're both massive blank voids with like one little thing in the middle. No, actually, the one chamber is like one massive blank void. The other one is like it's a little more nicely dressed. There's a little more in there. It's like a museum almost of rings. So one
Mhm.
empty void, but there's plenty of room in that void for a little museum. So I'm not gonna forgive him for that. That's like things like that. It just wastes my time. It adds playtime, but it doesn't add any fun time. That's my main issue with those. There's a couple more like little things like that. Like I think picking up bond fragments in general is just you want to do it because you don't want to miss out, and it's fun to mess around with the whole reclass system and the whole like there's a lot you can do with bond fragments, but picking them up is a pain. They should just give me the bond fragments. Like when you exit a chapter, you're done with the chapter, you get all the bond fragments for free. That's great. They should do that for everything. Just give me free bond fragments for doing
I
anything.
agree.
Like also achievements, give them to me automatically. Just give me the bond fragments. Don't make me claim them every time. Like little things like that. It's a little annoying. It kind of annoys me, but not enough to hate the game. I love the game, but these things are just they kind of itch. They kind of itch while you're playing.
Yeah, they're small little annoyances, but still the overall kind of thing they are in is still just a positive or fun to be in. Like the Somniel overall, I like you, I've been enjoying. It's a fun place to chill out between chapters. I've generally been enjoying just doing the activities around. But yeah, they like you're saying, these little itches inside, generally are an overall, fun part of the game.
Definitely. What do you think about the animals? And any animals? There are many.
There are a lot of animals. I haven't really dug deep into that system yet in terms of like I know certain animals give certain things and you can optimize like what animals you have to get like your I don't know iron output or ore output to like get weapons. I know you can do that. I haven't explored how you do that. And oftentimes when I've run into animals like after chapters that you can adopt, I think I just haven't put enough time into the system because a lot of animals I still just can't get yet. Where I'm like, oh, that's a cool animal, and then I can't adopt it because I haven't done something or haven't unlocked it yet. So it's not a system I've explored, deeply. I know there is definitely some big reward you can get if you put the time into it, but I just don't think I just haven't put time into that specific system to really have that much of opinion on it. It's a cute idea though. And it's fun to just see, just cool animals and just have them around. I think it'd be really funny if they weren't just limited to the pen, and if you just saw like a Campbell just walking by the pool.
Yeah.
Like, I think that would be cool. Having them in I guess it makes sense that they're in the area where you keep them because it makes it easier to collect all the items they drop. But yeah, I don't think I've had enough time with the system to really have a strong opinion one way or the other. It's a cool concept though, or neat idea.
Yeah. I haven't really dug in either. I just know the meta option is 4 dogs. So I have 4 dogs in my pen and I pick up all their iron. That's really the extent I've done to it. I've made one donation to the nation of Brodia to get better animals, but I haven't really looked deep into it. Donating is really expensive. It's like 5K for every level and it scales upwards. And while the game gives you a lot of gold for that purpose, I've been hoarding it for other purposes because, I'm scared like that. So I've limited my political bribery and animal collecting for that reason. Since you can only have 4 animals out at a time, it doesn't feel that worth to do that anyway. But yeah, haven't really gotten deep into it. There's one animal I do really like though that I've really come to like, and that is Somnie. At first, I was like,
oh, Sommie,
yeah, it was like it's 2 M's, right? Sommie? Yeah, I think I said it wrong the first time. Yeah, I was like, it's just a dog, and like the Lilith idea, like having it reference fates that way is super cool. But it's just a dog. How cool can it be? And then I got the dog, and I was like, well. This is kind of cute actually. I kind of like it. And then he started following me around. I was like, oh, that's actually pretty great. And then he just flopped onto his back. I was like, oh, I love this dog.
Yes. The Sami like not idle animation, but sleep animation where he just flops on his back. When you join, I'm very surprised how kind of fully realized that specific part of the Somniel is because he joins you for activities, he follows you around, he has like he's a source of bond fragments. They tie into so many aspects of the
He's even on the loading
Somniel
screen.
in
It's so
so
great.
many just cool, unique ways. Yeah, yeah. It's just the amount of I guess time and effort put into actually making Sommie feel a part of the world or a part of that part of the game is actually great. And it's that extra bit of flavor that makes a feature like the Somniel kind of pop is when it has stuff like that where you can just see the time, thought, and effort put into it, and just makes it feel much more, fun and alive when you have a little companion creature like that. It's not even that it's doing anything too complicated. It's just a small, simple, fun, cute feature that just overall raises I don't know, just makes it more fun.
Definitely. I think that the first time I looked at the minimap and I realized, hey, there's something moving around there. What is that? And I saw the little ears sticking out. And I was like, oh, no, they didn't. Oh, no, they. Oh, that's so great. That's so great. There's a K9 unit on its way to me, and it's great.
K9, yeah.
Yeah, he's great. Okay. Shall we move on to story and characters because I'm kind of interested in your thoughts on them. Obviously, again, we're going to stick to
Mhm.
early game mostly, pre chapter 10 because that's where I'm at. So don't worry too much about spoilers if you're a little further ahead or around that point. So I think I can sum up my thoughts by saying they roughly matched my expectations, which were not
Same.
super high, just like fun. Like it's a story that's there. It's kind of like as if a Fire Emblem AI or if an AI wrote a Fire Emblem story and it just kind of threw in everything they've got. That's the impression I'm getting so far. I'm not bothered by it like at all. I find myself like when I'm watching Fates or even Awakening sometimes or other stories of Fire Emblem that are just like usually lower regarded, I get a little bit annoyed because I'm comparing it to other games. But in this game, it just
Mhm.
doesn't bother me. I'm like, okay, whatever. It's a simple story. That's fine. And I know that people have said for the future there are actually some like twists and turns that I have to look forward to. So in a way, I expect that it will probably stay that way or get better as we go along. But for me right now, like most of the characters are kind of yeah, they're kind of one note. I like most of them better than I thought I would. I think that's because I don't know. I'm having a bit more fun with them and with the story in general than I thought I would. It's just like it's just there. It's not that serious. It's cool. I could just kind of watch the screen, watch the story go by, and if I miss one sentence, I won't have missed a whole lot because it's kind of going the way I expect it to.
Mhm.
That's the way I would summarize it. What about you?
Yeah, I think the way you experience the story is all about your expectations. I think, like you, I went in with expectations not too high of it to be. Again, from the trailers, it was pretty clear that this was going to be a pretty, silly, campy, more formulaic Fire Emblem story. So I wasn't surprised or disappointed in any way you know, when it turned out to be that way. If your first game was Three Houses and you love Fire Emblem, or one of the reasons you loved that game was because of its deep, rich world and characters and plots and moral gray areas, like you're not going to get that here. It's it's just not what the game is even trying to do. So I think maybe for players like that, it might be disappointing. I've been playing the series long enough now where I'm not disappointed if a Fire Emblem story doesn't really live up to my expectations. I think over the years I've come more to Fire Emblem for its gameplay than its story. Um, and so yeah, I thought the story is it's perfectly passable. At least it's fun. Like I've had fun with it at least. It's one of those things where just don't think too hard, have fun with what it throws at you, take it in stride, and it'll be enjoyable. And like people are saying, there are some twists and turns later on that are just even amp up that kind of fun and kind of loose feeling this story has. That's the way I'd kind of describe it. It's loose. It kind of just goes with the flow, but sometimes the flow goes in interesting ways because the story is kind of flexible and not too serious and too grounded, and it lets it do things that are, kind of fun. And I kind of respect it for that. So overall, it's not like a mind blowing, life changing story that's going to change how you see war or anything. Like that's not what it is. But I've had it. I've been enjoying it.
Hmm.
I've been enjoying it, and I think that's all. It's all due to expectations. It's all about what frame of mind you go into this game expecting to get. Just know you're not getting a Three Houses kind of story here if that was your first game, or that's what you come to Fire Emblem for.
Yeah, Three Houses was definitely more ambitious. One feeling I do have though is I would like the next game to try the Three Houses thing again. Not the story split, obviously the route split, but the ambition. I would like it back after this. I think this is fine
Yeah,
for one game, but after that, I would like it to amp it up again. A little bit. Do you agree? Or are you fine with like more games like this?
I wouldn't be disappointed if they did more like this. I do think Fire Emblem has a uh, you know, high potential level in terms of telling a compelling war story. I think we've seen glimpses of that in previous entries. I know, like Three Houses, a very ambitious story. Personally, it didn't click with me, but I know it clicked with a lot of people. and a lot of people really like that story. And I'd love Fire Emblem to go back and try and pull that kind of story off again. But I wouldn't be disappointed if they don't. I think it goes back to the thought now of like, I think the reason I come back to this series isn't really the story anymore. I think there's still a lot of people who do, but I think for me personally, that's not why I come to the series anymore. So I'm fine with whatever direction they take it. Would I prefer a more serious and ambitious direction for a Fire Emblem story? Yeah, I think so, but I'm not holding my breath for it or keeping it as an expectation. I think the one thing though, I can say that about the story. For the characters, I think it's another matter
Mm-hmm.
of like, I guess to go into my brief thoughts on the characters in this game.
Yeah.
So far, I've had a lot of fun with them as well. I'd say with the supports, I haven't been the most impressed with the early supports, at least. But Fire Emblem often has this where the C supports are the characters just kind of gimmicking at each other, like they're just doing their gimmick at each other, and that's the C support. There's been only really a handful of conversations where I was like, that was a really insightful and fun conversation. And I feel like a lot of the character depth is gonna be coming from these supports, and for what I've seen so far, I haven't been the most impressed. But there's been a few characters where in the trailers I was like, I don't know about this character. And then throughout the story and a few of their supports, I'm like, you know what? I kind of like what they're doing here. Or I kind of like the direction they're taking it. So overall, I say my impression of the characters is still positive. I'm not far enough into the game to get deep into supports. I
Mm-hmm.
just say from the supports I've seen of the characters, I have not been the most impressed. Um, but I think that's fine. Yeah, I'm curious to hear your thoughts about that as well.
Yeah, I think the characters right now, I find it hard to get to those depths because the support system is very different from Three Houses. In Three Houses, for
Yeah.
example, if you build up supports with characters with almost everything you do in the monastery and in battle, so many more things to do that give support points. Whereas here, you have a couple of opportunities to like you dine once per chapter, and that's with two other people, and that's about it. In battle, you have to, I think, you have to battle the same enemy, or you have to be adjacent, one of the two, to get support points. Whereas in Three Houses, it was a bit more flexible that way. And there's a couple of other things like that that make building supports a little harder. And I
Hmm.
think that's right now that's hurting my impression of the characters a little bit because I've only had C supports with most characters. I think I got up to B with like Fram or something because he's the only character from the very early game who I've fielded. Everyone else is at C or at nothing. And usually they just get their C through in a random arena battle. So overall, it is hard for me to get to the depths of the characters. I don't have the feeling that I know the units that I'm using very well. I like a lot of characters in this game, mostly because what they do for me in the gameplay. I have some favorites that I guess I can quickly go through, and it's all based on what they've done for me in the gameplay. For example, I like
Hmm.
Chloe because she's really good for me. I promoted her first, and she's slaughtering everything, partially because I'm giving her good resources. I like Lewis because he takes hits like a champ, and he makes the game a lot easier by not getting broken and countering stuff. Just being a wall is super helpful. And I like Yunaka because she's funnier than I expected her to be, and she dodges everything. Again, it's mostly gameplay. There's a couple character moments that made me like them more. I do enjoy Yunaka's interactions with the other characters, uh,
Same.
like the part about her lying almost out of a habit. I think is a very interesting character to explore, and I hope they go into it deeper. But it's all very surface level. And like you said, in C supports especially, units just gimmick at each other. And the worst part of that for me was I forgot to unlock a bunch of C supports until a certain point. I was like looking at my support list, like, oh, I have a lot of these to do.
Uh-huh.
So I started going through them. And so I tried to read them all. But after the seventh time that Saline had tea with someone, I was like, all right, thanks. I think this girl likes tea. Cool. And
Yeah.
this is just a consequence of the way that they've chosen to write supports. I'm not necessarily saying that this is the worst way they could have done it, but this is what happens when you write supports in this order because you can unlock them in any order. They're not locked to certain chapters. Just generally speaking, the characters don't comment much on the current situation because they could be dead or because they just go with generic quotes in the Somniel. And so, unlike in Three Houses, they're just saying generic stuff a lot, which makes them feel a bit shallow to me right now. Like you said, the death usually comes from the later support ranks, and I'm hoping to unlock those at some point. but it's been a bit of a struggle to unlock those compared to other games, and so I'm a little worried that I won't get to them for some characters, and that's unfortunate. But I have some high hopes when I do eventually unlock them. I think if I work at it, I can probably get it done. But the surface impression gets old quite quickly for me. That's my thoughts on them, at least. Is
Yeah.
that your experience as well?
Yeah, definitely my experience as well. And I even agree with your thoughts on Yunaka. I'd say out of the main or out of the cast that's been introduced so far as a character, I think Yunaka's been the character that's been the most fun. And also, like you're mentioning, has a bit or quite a bit more layers to her character than some of the other cast. Like her Yunaka's first impression is great in the story, and then everything about her afterward only reinforces kind of both how fun her character is and the layers to it. So I'd say I echo your thoughts almost 1-to-1 on most things. And I also feel with this game, this ties into supports but also ties into other parts of the game as well. But supports is a big part of this, is like you're saying, because supports build up so slow and you're really only fielding a limited amount of the cast. And this is a problem that really comes up later. They really give you a lot of units, but you only have about like 10 to 8 deployment slots per chapter. So you're benching a large part of the cast, especially once you get to the mid game. And that is really frustrating, at least to me. It means I'm going to have to do repeat playthroughs really to get the full experience of this game. Because there's so many characters that I'm just not going to get supports for. Even if I wanted to, I really just wouldn't have the resources or the ability to. And there's a lot of characters that I want to use that I just don't have a place for on my team. But it does mean the replayability of this game, I think, is going to be pretty high. But also it's frustrating to, like you say, have such slow progress with supports and just know that I'm not gonna be able to really see stuff I missed in other support conversations with characters I don't use. And it doesn't mean I don't like those characters. There could be characters I really like, but I just can't really explore them, or if I'm not using them, or dedicating my limited support resources into them. So it's a positive in terms of probably going to add replayability, but it's a negative in terms of a in the moment first playthrough experience. It's like, oh man, like I just got this awesome character, but they don't really have a place on my team, and I can't build support points with them because I got to use those support points on other characters that I actually want to use in battle. Yeah, it's a bit frustrating in a few ways.
Yeah, for sure. I think this extends a little bit to the emblem characters in a different way, because they also have a ton of conversations. They're all very short. It's like a C, a B, and an A that are like one, and 2 sentences each with a bunch of characters. And from what I've heard, most people are like positively impressed by how much they managed to do with those lines. But
Yep.
they also feel like I think afterthought is not the right word for it, but they don't really feel like part of what I'm doing. These emblems show up and they say something that I feel like almost any character could say, because Fire Emblem Lords have a lot of overlap in what they are. Like, they're usually righteous, knightly, honorable people that are various shades of nice is a phrase I've heard before. Used to describe Fire Emblem characters. They're just kind of there. And then once they've joined, even when they join, they don't usually say something that feels like it came from them. I think there's exceptions to that rule, but generally speaking, it felt a bit generic. And then once they're around in Somniel, they also only have generic lines. And they even have the same lines, I think, many chapters in a row, at least from my experience. So it feels like I just have generic characters that have the old emblem bodies superposed over them. And I think that's a bit of a disappointment. I wasn't expecting too much from them, but it's still a little saddening to me to see Celica and Sigurd floating around, basically just being there in service of this game. And like, it's just a reference. There's not much to it. There's not much behind the curtain there. I know there's a little more to it because of the blonde covers that I haven't seen, but overall, I'm not really impressed with their appearances in this game. What about you?
Yeah, they truly feel like ghosts or summons, or they don't feel
They
like
are,
real
but them.
characters. Yeah, it's like they are really, as characters, they are just there. I will say some of the later Bond convos are a bit better. I think the dullness of some of the early ones is a combination of the early game cast not having kind of the most unique character traits, paired with like very generic, like you're saying, quotes from the emblems themselves. There's just not a lot for the characters to play off each other there. I think some of the later characters that you unlock, combined with some of the later emblems you unlock, leads for more interesting, I guess, one-line conversations. I think the dullness of the early ones is a consequence of the kind of setup, but they never truly reach a life-changing or like crazy insightful conversation level. And I agree with you that the emblems, just as characters, they're just kind of there. They feel almost like cosmetic onto themselves.
Yeah.
Only flashes, or there's only glimpses or flashes of anything beyond that. But they're just that, glimpses and flashes. And it is a bit of a shame, especially like you're saying, especially with Sigurd, a character where, not many people or anybody who hasn't played FE4 or really dug into the lore, maybe if they saw him Heroes, like that is a character that is full of such interesting depth, and you really only get the surface of just I'm a guy with blue hair on a horse.
Yeah.
And then like maybe one or two lines that maybe provoke a little bit of intrigue. I think there's one line in chapter 2 or chapter 3 related to Lumera that is like,
yeah, I was going to say, I think it's
that.
really interesting you bring up Sigurd here because he's almost the opposite in some ways. Like he has that one line that I think I know what you mean with that one line. I'm not going to say it because I think it's a bit of a spoiler in itself.
Yeah.
But that line is interesting if you have played the game. And Sigurd is also the one character that has like a weird gameplay set for what he does in the game. Like he has a bunch of lances that he's not really known for using in FE4, you know what I mean? Like the Rider's Bane is not really a Sigurd weapon. Nobody thinks, oh, Sigurd, the guy with the Rider's Bane. Whereas, for example, Marth has the Rapier. That makes sense. Celica has Warp Ragnarok. I mean, Celica doesn't really have Warp, but she does learn Ragnarok, and she does get warped around sometimes, I guess. And I think in a way, like the gameplay does a better job of characterizing these emblems than any written text in the game does. If you look at like all the little skills and bonds things that they get, I'm trying to come up with a non-spoilery example. If you think of one, Celica has a bond skill where if the character that she's bonded with eats their food, like their leftover food, they get more health back or something, or they reset their emblem gauge.
The engage, the engage gets filled.
Because the food in Fire Emblem Echoes, I think that's such references are absolutely great, and I love all of them. Yeah. Stuff like that is really good. Is there any others that you can think of top of your head? I'm trying to think of one.
Not off the top of my head, but I'd agree that like the emblems themselves and their abilities in the gameplay really does feel like a love letter to previous entries and a celebration of previous entries. It's just a shame that the text and dialogue for them doesn't really match or follow up that what's going on in the gameplay in terms of, reminiscing and embracing those characters and their games as legacies. But yeah, I can't think of another example off the top of my head, but they are there.
I thought of another one for Celica. It's the fact that she's extra effective on like the Corrupted or AKA monsters, like with Seraphim, stuff like that. It's a neat little thing that they found a place for in the game. It's a good mechanic within the gameplay design, but it also works to show what Celica was all about in her game. Or even the fact that Celica bonds with Celine, who is herself not really a lord, but kind of a lord. Like she's a royal. She uses swords and magic just like Celica. Stuff like that is just neat. Or the fact that Micaiah bonds with Yunaka and in the Fog of War chapter. And they're basically Yunaka's a thief and Micaiah's with Soth. Like stuff like that is just neat. I love that so much.
There's lots of little touches and nods to people who know their stuff about previous games are going to find a lot to love in this game in terms of nods to previous stuff, especially in terms of gameplay.
Definitely true. Okay, I have one more main topic, and I guess we can eat some leftovers after that if you've got anything else on your mind, which is the presentation of the game. We covered this pretty elaborately in your video, where we're like, oh, this game is good looking and flashy looking. I have one additional thought. Like I think we both agree, like the visuals hold up well, right? Like the trailer wasn't just baiting us. The game looks good, right?
Oh yeah, it looks great.
Yeah, there's a bunch of different ways I can describe this. I think, like I said on your video, I think you have the better vocabulary to describe why it exactly looks so great. I can barely pronounce the words frame rate as it is, but it looks good. I find myself that the animations, I find when I'm playing, it's so fast. I almost miss it a lot of the time. Like there's some I'm like, oh wow, that's so good. I can take my time to look at this. Like when Fram is like kickboxing someone, I really do
Uh-huh.
appreciate that. But everything else is like whoosh and it's over. I'm like, damn, I forgot to look because I'm so focused on the numbers and making sure I'm making the right moves. I sometimes miss it a little bit. But this game is just looks so smooth and nice. It's so good.
Yeah. If you're holding A, some of the animations will go by in a blink. Sometimes I'm consciously like, okay, I'm not going to hold down A like for this animation because I really want to see it play out. But sometimes if you're holding A, yeah, it'll just be blink and you miss.
I
Like
don't even hold A to tell you the truth.
you're not even holding. Yeah, honestly, that doesn't even surprise me though because the base animations they are quick, they are snappy. If you hold and if you hold A, which I've been doing, they just I get literally you blink and you will miss what just happened. That's happened a few times to me where I'm like, wait, what just happened? What? But I mean, that's like a definitely a small thing. I think overall that the animation work here, I think probably the best it's been in 3D. The presentation, best it's been in 3D for Fire Emblem. Like just so clean, so I mean, for the most part, readable. Other than like we're mentioning, I guess some of the issues with the speed of the animations, making things a bit hard to miss. But this is bar none the best looking Fire Emblem game. I don't know what they did or what they changed with their visual direction in terms of their staff or what changes they made, but the changes they made have paid off massively here. I'd say the one thing that I was actually sold on super before the game and then playing with the game a bit, I'm not as sold on is actually some of the like weird UI
Mm-hmm.
like inconsistencies
Yeah, I'm
or
glad you
just
brought it
weird
up. Yeah,
things. I find doubles in this game. The only way you know an attack is a double is if you look at the arrows. Um,
at the bottom, you mean?
Going back and forth. Yeah, if you look at the arrows in the battle preview, that's the only way you know if something's doubling. Whereas before, it was so clear. It was just this damage x2, and it would say that explicitly. It's this damage times 2 in the amount of damage you're doing on like the numbers preview, right? It would just outright say it. Now there's no x2 like UI element anywhere, and there's been multiple times where I've been like, "Oh, I just get this kill, they die." And I just wasn't even looking at the arrows, and then like I got hit by something, and I'm like, "What? I was supposed to do 48 damage, but it wasn't 48 damage. It was 24 get hit, then do 24, and I just wasn't mentally recognizing that because they took away that UI element. Like that's a small thing with the UI that led to a bit of frustration because it's one of the things where it's almost always been that way, where there's been that little X2 indicator and now it's gone. Um, so it's an adjustment. I don't know if it's necessarily bad, but it's just been that's one little small inconsistent with the UI that's a little bugged me about the presentation. There's been a few other UI things. I feel like the game sometimes navigating the UI is a bit clunkier than it has been in previous entries. I think I was playing a bunch of Awakening in the lead up to this game because of my series where I had chat play the game, and I was navigating the menus in that game, and man, it's so snappy, so slower, a bit clunkier on the UI navigation, a bit less responsive. Not unplayable by any means, but just not as snappy as I would like it to be. But that's in the great scheme of things, that's a small nitpick. I think the presentation of the UI and the presentation of the game and the graphics is still, I think, the best it's ever been.
Yeah, I'm agreeing on the whole. I think for a lot of things that the UI does differently, it's not necessarily that these are changes that are bad in a vacuum. It's just that they change something that has been a way it has been for a long time. It's something that has changed up. It takes a lot of time to get used to it. And I'm wondering if I've played this game to the point where I finish it, maybe even twice, and I go back to other games, if I'm going to be just as annoyed switching back, because it's just this times two thing, but there's also something like bringing up one menu with plus and the other one with X that used to be reversed, I think, in Three Houses and every game before that. Stuff like that is like, okay, there's probably a good reason why you did this, but it's going to take some time to getting used to. I'm not sure if it needed to be changed. That doesn't necessarily mean that was a bad choice in the first place at all, but it's just like, it's going to take me some time to get used to, and it really didn't have to be that way. But I also agree with the clunkiness of the menus, by the way. I've noticed that as well. I've been maybe like gaslighting myself, like maybe trying to blame like myself for it. Like, okay, I pressed A by accident, but that was my fault. But maybe it was the clunkiness of the AI that made me do it. I'll have to take a closer look at that. In general, they've made some fun changes, right, to the UI, like the way that if you're like moving a character close to an enemy, you can see how much damage you're about to do, which is it's the kind of quality of
It's
life
great.
change where I'm super bad at using it because I don't expect it to be there. I expect to have like open the whole battle forecast to figure that part out, and it's gonna take me a long time to get used to. Oh, I can just do that. Just like how long it took me to get used to like playing on a dual screen, for example, to just see the stats there. I was keep like looking in the wrong places all the time. I think overall this game is a pretty big win for the UI, barring some changes and weirdness that I think they could have tested a little bit better. But overall, I'm kind of pleased with how it rolled out. But part of it is having to get used to it, and part of it is like, why did you change that? You didn't have to change that.
Yeah, one change I love. One change I love is not having to go into a unit's inventory to see what they have.
Mm-hmm.
I love that little thing that they display at the bottom of the screen, where when you hover over a unit, there's that little bar, and it says it has all their stats that you would need to know from them in terms of their attack, their defense, and it tells you what weapon they have equipped. It doesn't tell you necessarily maybe what backup items they have. I mean, you can see that little preview of the icons of what they have as well. Um, but that's great. The features that allow you to get like press ZR or ZR and like preview like on the map like exactly what stats everybody has. Like you can make it so you get little numbers on every single unit that tells you like their physical attack and defense, and great customability and great quality of life features on the UI that overall make it so much smoother to play and not have to navigate so many menus like you're saying in previous entries.
Yeah, I think they really did a good job of trying to do what they used to do with two screens and have to put it on one. Because the 3DS, for example, you would like move over units to check their stats and then see their stats on the bottom screen. And ever since they
Yep.
switched back to one screen, can't really do that anymore unless you dedicate a lot of screen area. But I think they found a happy medium between the utility of the two screens, but putting it on one screen. I think they did a absolutely great job there. I didn't even realize slash know slash remember that you could do that, by the way. So you like there's like a button you can press to see everyone's physical attack at once, like on the whole screen. That's cool.
Yep. If you hold ZR, it'll bring up a bunch of options that lets you scroll through what you want to display over top of units on the map. There's a few options there. You can see like their, I think, speed, magic attack, physical attack.
Oh,
It'll give you two stats you'll see at once, and that gives you a bunch of combos of like what you can see. And that's really, really useful. And you can toggle it too. It'll be like when you press ZR or hold, like just press it, you'll see it, and then if you hold it, you can change what it's showing. So you can just quickly flash up what the horde of enemies in front of you has at a glance in like that like stat category. It's really, really useful. And I love these features. I really hope that they keep them going forward. These are the type of features that probably came later into development and were able to be put in because of polish. But I hope because they're in this game now that they just become the standard and are implemented going forward, because man, it makes the experience so much more seamless and fun.
absolutely. I have no further thoughts on presentation or anything else I've jotted down. Is there anything you would like to do for bonus round, Pavise? Anything you want to bring up that we haven't talked about yet?
Not in terms of presentation, at least.
No, just overall. Because I have a lot of things to say. Like I think we discussed every single aspect within almost exactly 1 hour of this game.
I know. I think I'm good if you want to segue into final thoughts.
Yeah, sure thing. I'm enjoying this game a lot. I'm wondering how much of this will change for me in like let's say another 5 to 10 chapters. Like maybe I'll have a different opinion on like the gameplay. For I could see that changing, for example, for the better or for the worse. Or I'm very interested in if that's going to change for you as well. But right now, I'd say, or like, it's not that the game is perfect, but the game is so fun that I just kind of don't want to stop playing it. That's my overall summation of Engage. What about you?
Like I said at the beginning of the video, most positive experience or most fun I've had with the series in years. I really hope it keeps it up. I'm about at the halfway point of the game now. Being at this point, I only hope that it can keep this up, because if it can, I think this will easily be within my favorite entries in the series if it keeps this up. and I really just can't wait to play more. I have the same feeling. I can't wait to play more. I always feel like playing more, and I haven't had that feeling with Fire Emblem for quite a while. So the fact it's making me feel that, I think, is an endorsement in of itself, at least for me.
Same here. All right. Guess that's gonna do it for today. Thank you for listening, watching, or sleeping if you're already asleep. Pavise, thank you for joining me. And I don't know when I'm going to be doing this kind of thing again. Like I said, it might be a couple episodes, and I plan to invite different guests every time. But Pavise, I do hope to see you back at some point for some video or another, because it was great having you on. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. If people are interested in hearing more from me, I am streaming the whole game. I'm uploading highlights from my playthrough if you don't want to watch whole streams either. So if you want more engaged content, or you like what I said here, then hey, there's more where that came from. But yeah, thanks for having me on, Mecca. It's always a pleasure talking with you.
No problem. I'll try to put your Twitch in the description as well, but I'm assuming it's like...
It's not, I stream on YouTube, but...
Oh, wait, you stream on YouTube now. That's right. Didn't you stream on Twitch before? Am I dumb?
No, I've always streamed on YouTube.
Oh, I'm dumb. I'm sorry. I
Don't worry about it.
All right. I'll put your links, all your things in the description. You can find them there. But I'm sure you've already found them if you liked them. But still, I'm going to put it there. Anyway, thanks for listening, everybody. Have a good time. Later.
Ciao.